WB audio capture not registered.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Launcher live stream. We're the video games section of the Washington Post. I'm Shannon Liao, I'm a video games reporter for Launcher, and I'm joined today by my editor, Mike Hume. Mike, say hi.
Hey everybody.
Yeah, so today we're here to talk about Activision Blizzard's lawsuit that was filed by California's Department of Fair Employment and Housing just last week, which has rippled through the video games industry and led to responses from management and employees responding back to management with a walkout, an open letter, and much, much more, all happening across this week that we've been covering each day. And yeah, we can just dive right into it. A lot of serious issues in this case, and we're here to talk about it and what we know so far.
Yeah, for sure, Shannon. I think there's plenty to digest here and a lot of nuance that we need to pick apart a little bit. And to help us do that, we're actually going to be joined by Noah Smith in a little bit. He's running a little bit late, so he might just appear magically in a window in the next couple of minutes here. So we'll welcome him when that happens. But first, Shannon, let's just start with the actual lawsuit. Like, this was filed July 20th, and it came as a bit of a bombshell to everyone. This was not something the media certainly expected. What was your initial reaction to the findings that were brought and the allegations made by the DFEH in the suit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when I saw it, I think it was like a weekday evening, and so initially I thought, well, there's always been a lot of allegations, and so I thought, okay, we will cover this tomorrow morning. But immediately, everybody. I think all newsrooms and not just like video games websites were drawn to this, and this actually attracted a lot of attention because it's a
audio
public company.
capture
It's
not
one of the biggest gaming
registered.
companies in the world. It's worth billions of dollars. It makes Call of Duty and World of Warcraft, and it's just so many allegations in this lawsuit. It's very shocking what happened, and it just spans across like pay and equity, sexual harassment, misconduct, and just the description of a culture within Activision Blizzard that enabled all of this behavior to happen, and for people to report it to human resources and maybe not get their report heard. So this lawsuit was just massive, and it just started to ripple across the industry from there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was sort of my top line takeaways was the sweep and breadth of the allegations. The DFEH certainly alleged that there were pay discrepancies between men and women. There were gender discrimination in terms of hiring and advancement throughout the company. But also they touched on sexual harassment and toxic work environments, and the specificity with which they did so, naming a member of the Blizzard Entertainment World of Warcraft team, and also Jay Allen Brack, the president of Blizzard Entertainment, specifically, and pointing out that he allegedly knew of multiple instances of toxicity. That really jumped out to me, that this went as high and as wide as we've seen so far. Like, this is a pretty stunning allegation that they're leveling at Activision Blizzard. And then to see Activision Blizzard fire back so ferociously in their comments, their public statement in response to the suit, and basically say, like, this is why companies leave California, was a little strange to me from a takeaway as well. Like, that seemed to have a little bit of sharp
SWB audio
language to
capture
that
not
wasn't
registered.
necessarily a refutation of the lawsuit outright, but also some of the underlying circumstances that it seems like Activision Blizzard is trying to surface about the suit. Obviously, Shannon, there's been quite a bit of developments, or quite a number of developments in the days since the lawsuit. We obviously have been diving through this for the past couple of days now, but let's talk about the most recent one, which is the walkout yesterday. You were talking to some of the organizers. What have you learned? What was sort of the biggest motivation behind the walkout and the protest yesterday?
Yeah, so to understand why the employees had to walk out, we also have to look back at how Activision Blizzard management responded to the initial lawsuit coming out, which was President of Activision Blizzard, President of Blizzard, J. Allen Brack, wrote an email to staff saying like, obviously misconduct is wrong. If you know of anything, please report it to HR. And so the first email was received by employees as, okay, well, at least there's some kind of response. And then there was Francis Townsend, the chief compliance officer, emailing everyone. And this email, a lot of people responded with anger to Townsend, saying the lawsuit presented a distorted or untrue picture of what had happened at the company. And Townsend only joined Activision Blizzard in March. So she's only been there for 4 months. And so from her response, that's what led to a lot of employees being angry and then staging this walkout to demand. They have 4 demands. One of them is more pay transparency. So more trying to facilitate to kind of respond to the pay inequality that was alleged in the lawsuit.
SWB
And
audio
also like
capture,
greater,
not registered.
wider diversity, trying to get more workers involved in how they hire for diverse and inclusive a workplace. And they also had a demand for a lack of like forced, to stop having forced arbitration clauses in every employee's contract. And then another demand was that they would like to hire a third party to audit the human resources and company processes from there. And those are all kind of in response to the allegations from the suit. So, yeah.
No, I want to get back to the forced arbitration point a little bit later, hopefully once Noah joins, because I think that's an underreported element of this story and sort of what that means. But I want to talk about the general sentiment at Activision Blizzard right now. In the conversations you've been having with employees, not just with Activision Blizzard, but around the video game industry, just surveying it from social media personally, it feels like there's a lot of anger, a lot of frustration right now. They feel that the system is failing them, that we've had this conversation 1,000 times already, and we're having it again, and they just don't understand why this has to keep happening. And one of the more interesting developments for me yesterday was the Ubisoft open letter that employees at Ubisoft who have had over the past year, several executives removed over charges of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct or other workplace misconduct, authored a letter in solidarity of Activision Blizzard, but also called for the formation of what looked like to be an oversight committee, an oversight body that would review instances of like those that were being surfaced to HR and not being acted on, that they have these serial instances of bad actors in some of these companies that linger or worse are promoted into leadership positions.
SWB audio
I think
capture,
that
not
really, this
registered.
feels like an inflection point, that we're coming to a time now when the employees of these studios are saying, hey, look, enough is enough. If no one's going to look out for us through the traditional means, through HR, through leadership, through management taking action, we have to start taking action ourselves and watching our own backs. So to me, I think this is going to be a really interesting period in terms of the industry's evolution, because I just sense a ton of frustration with this. Like, it can't continue, and there are a lot of people that are now taking action and determined that it won't continue.
Right. I mean, I think you raised some good points. Yeah, when it comes to Ubisoft, last year they were already in the headlines, and a couple of executives departed the company after so many allegations came through from women telling their stories about having faced sexual harassment, discrimination while they're working at Ubisoft. And so we've already heard those allegations last year, and Ubisoft, promised to do better. They promised to change. The CEO came through. Oh, is that okay? We might have Noah here soon.
He's in the green room.
Yeah, he's preparing to join. Right. So we've already heard that from Ubisoft CEO that they were trying to make changes, and then now we hear from their employees that not enough changes happened. So it's definitely recurring, recycling, and even across social media, I've seen responses saying that people are not willing to report to HR because HR is trying to protect the company's interests, and that's what they usually do. But anyway, let's welcome Noah. Thank you for coming on. Are you there? Okay, maybe.
That might have been premature.
Okay, well, anyway, Noah will join us very soon, and he wrote a really good article for us this week about more of like the legal implications of the
SWP
suit
audio
and talking to a
capture,
couple lawyers.
not
So I
registered.
would love to talk more about that soon, as soon as he can join us. But
Wait for the magic. I think it's coming.
also, for everyone tuning in, please drop your questions down in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them.
That's for sure. And while we're waiting for Noah to sort out his technical difficulties, he's on West Coast time, so we'll say that's part of the issue. There he is. He's even got a jacket on. Wow.
Wow.
I put on a jacket for the occasion, guys. I am on West Coast time, which means we are later, which means I was later.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a thing or not.
that's the reason. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go with it. Let's go with it.
I'll make the argument. Listen, I've been talking to lawyers for the past few days, so I feel like I can make an argument almost anything.
Okay.
I don't know where exactly. I apologize.
Yeah.
For being late. I don't know exactly where I jumped in, so I hope we were not talking about certain elements of this case because this will have been wildly inappropriate. So.
Okay. Yeah. So we are
yes.
we are here to talk about your article, and you just joined us at the perfect time. Can we talk about what you've learned from talking to lawyers and what is presented in your story?
Sure. So I think that the most notable thing about this is the fact that DFEH brought it. What was made very clear to me is that DFEH as a state agency here in California, like every government agency, has very limited resources. And so if they chose to bring this case, it's an indication that they feel pretty confident about it. Number one, and then number two, other ways of trying to reconcile some of the charges being brought had failed. So we know that that the agency had made, I believe it was 3 or 4 attempts in July in meetings and mediation to try to come to some terms, try to come to solve the complaints. They were unsuccessful in doing so, and attorneys also said that they were struck by that because as a journalist, because usually we don't see these kinds of cases come to light. Companies, individuals, oftentimes prefer to settle them out of court for pay some money, move on. These sorts of allegations don't come forward, and so the graphic nature of them, the alleged pervasive nature of some of the violations it just makes it all the more surprising that Activision chose to move forward in defending it rather than settling it.
One of my questions, Noah, it seemed like Activision Blizzard was trying to make this point in its statement after the lawsuit was filed, was that the DFEH was overreaching here, that it's overstepping its bounds in its jurisdiction, that it is misrepresenting a lot of its facts, and that part of the statement, as Shannon mentioned earlier, angered a lot of the employees who have a very different viewpoint. But from what you know, from what you've learned and studied about the DFEH and how the California legal system works, does this at all seem like an overstep, or is it just unusual because they took up the case themselves?
It doesn't seem like an overstep at all. It's a civil rights agency that's brought a civil rights-based case. So that was an argument that certain defense attorneys have made. A lot of that was also based on procedural grounds, and it gets sort of in the weeds with court rules and depositions and when discovery has to be done and who gets to do and things like that. But at the root of this is, again, a civil rights focused state agency bringing a civil rights focused case. So I think it's hard to make the argument that they've overstepped. Certainly arguments could be made about focus, that this isn't the best use of their time. It's possible to make that argument. I think the counter to that argument is that, which is what the director of DFEH told me, is that, look, he said, we're looking for cases that could potentially have the most impact, affect the most people, target some of the worst offenders. And so he was not saying that Activision necessarily was any one of those things specifically, but there was an indication that it had to at least have been one of them for them to have brought that case. The other thing I'd like to say is that there's a subtle distinction. So it's not that it's rare for DFEH to bring cases. It's that it's just they get usually over 20,000 different complaints per year. And so in 2019, they brought 4 cases, which was an anomaly. In 2018, and from 2016 to 2016, 2017, 2018, it hovered around 30. So they're bringing cases, but it's just they're very selective in what they choose to bring.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. California has millions of residents, and maybe they get lots of complaints every year. The DFEH does, and they chose to focus on this one. And I think that speaks to what you were saying about the most impact. I'm wondering if you heard anything about where it would go from here. Where could the case go next?
Certainly. So, like every civil case, what the next thing that's going to happen is that Activision is required to respond to this filing. So they have basically 2 choices. Number one, they can challenge the claims, defend themselves against the claims, and there's a distinction legal thing between claims and complaints. So basically, what they've been accused of, they have to respond to. That's one option. The other option, which again, a lot of the experts who I spoke to, a lot of the attorneys I spoke to, predicted that they would do, is actually challenge the case on more procedural grounds, attacking the DFEH's either standing to bring the claim, or that they didn't follow certain procedures in the government codes, or that this isn't the right jurisdiction for it, or that something that essentially doesn't address what is being alleged, but just sort of says, hey, this didn't follow the rules, so this shouldn't proceed. That's the first thing. That's going to be within, I think, 30 to 60 days. The second thing, the judge is going to rule at that point if the case proceeds or not. Once the judge rules on that, it goes into the discovery phase, meaning both sides share documents, both sides can conduct depositions, which are like witness examinations out of court, but have the force of court. And then after that, once again, the judge will decide if it can move forward. The judge decides it moves forward, and the 2 sides have not settled. It will then move to the trial phase, where the trial, everyone kind of knows what a trial is. You're going to have witnesses, you're going to have testimony. DFEH has demanded a jury trial, so it remains to be seen whether that or not that would be granted, but it could progress to that point. And again, most people I spoke to said that they, number one, didn't expect it to go to this point. They definitely don't expect it to go to the trial phase, but given that it's come this far, sort of anything could happen.
Yeah, that was one thing that stood out to me from your article. Was you had one of the lawyers basically expressing their sincere surprise that they didn't settle, that this reached this point, even more or less the fact that it could reach a trial phase. There's already been a lot of dirty laundry aired through these allegations. Again, that they are just allegations at this point. Certainly, nothing has been proven until a trial setting. But the surprise is just that it got to this point. What do you think that means as far as actually, let me rephrase. So we talked a little bit earlier, Shannon and I, about the whole forced arbitration, private arbitration, rather, as opposed to holding these trials in public, as this one is on track to be done, to be held, done, whatever. Why is that so significant? The private arbitration, that's a specific demand of the Activision Blizzard employees that were protesting yesterday. What's the significance of private arbitration, and why do most employees want that done away with?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a few ways to get into that question. One is that I would argue, and I think it's fair to say, that from the employee standpoint, they're giving up certain rights. So when they forego their ability to bring claims in court, they're foregoing their ability to have that review process, and all the things that our American system and California system in this case entitles them to, for a forum that is private, either through American AAA or through JAMS, which are, one's a nonprofit, I think one is for profit, that I believe, but don't quote me, are paid for by the company. So there's a difference in incentive. I would argue, it's hard not to see that there could be something untoward about that. That's my opinion, to be clear. So I think that there's something about that. Obviously, then the other thing, which is what makes this case all the more interesting, is Activision and many other companies. It's a very common process, although now becoming more controversial about these arbitration clauses. The reason is to prevent exactly this thing from happening: embarrassment, claims coming out, having these things be aired in the public. So this is why companies tend to go to that trouble. Also, because clearly they think it's going to benefit them. Why would companies put a clause in there that would put them at a disadvantage? If if all things being equal. So I think that sort of, I mean, those are a few of the issues surrounding them. The last thing I would say is that obviously the Activision employees who were there, who spoke to you, Shannon, and who were just with the walkout, obviously don't feel that it has led to an environment where there are consequences, where putting things in private and doing things in arbitration doesn't lead to ending this alleged behavior or ending the culture that they found problematic.
Right. So yeah, and also I would just add on to that like forced arbitration sometimes goes hand in hand with like non-disclosure agreements. So an employee would maybe have a complaint, but then it would go into forced arbitration, and they would never be able to publicize that to anyone, and it would definitely not come to the media, and then we would not be able to write about it. And so that is a way for the company to potentially kind of bury some of these cases as they come about. I want to take a couple questions from the chat. Like, some people are very curious. So one person, David Lum, he says, "Hi, is the severity of the allegations greater than in the Riot case? And is there anything here specific to video game studios, or is it being treated fully as a workplace case?" Okay.
In terms of the severity of the charges, I think they're very similar. I think that's sort of a relative question. Like any sort of sexual harassment, sexual assault, certainly is a serious charge. I think one of the things that you wrote about, Shannon, in the very first wave, when you spoke with Michael Pachter, was that the numbers he threw out as a potential ultimate figure for resolving this case was a much larger number than what Riot had settled with for its own lawsuit, if I remember correctly. I think that was $10 million for the Riot, and then and now and actually DFEH is has stepped in there as well, recommending a much larger settlement to the tune of $400 million, I believe. So yeah, I think they're similar in a lot of regards. And actually, one of the things that stood out to me for the suit was when it was filed, when the investigation began, which was only several months after the Kotaku story that basically launched the Riot lawsuit, and it's doing introspection, scandal, and reforms. It's clear that 2018 August through October was a time when there was a lot of focus on the video game industry, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Personally, this is just my opinion, but I don't believe in coincidences. That you had that article, then you had the Riot scandal come out, and then you had this investigation begin.
Right. Yeah. Actually, so I would like to add on. And I was just trying to process this question, but compared to the DFEH investigation, the lawsuit brought on against Riot was, with a few plaintiffs, like women at Riot, were leveling this case, right? And so the scope of that was a bit smaller because it's not a government body that was suing Riot. And also Riot, as you mentioned, Mike, is so Activision Blizzard is a public company, and Riot is owned by Tencent, which is based in China. And so there wasn't as much of a giant monetary figure attached to the stock price that is plummeting. Whereas if we look at the Activision Blizzard stock over the past 2 weeks, it's lower than it was year to date, right? So it actually has a kind of like a public stock impact as well, which is something that Michael Pachter was telling me about, and which also drives more public attention in case anybody in the public owns stock of Blizzard. They would maybe be impacted by this as well. And then not only that, but also the claims in this lawsuit, as we said at the beginning of this live stream, have spanned across not just sexual assault, misconduct, but also pay inequity and wages and discrimination and racism and sexism. So it goes on. And I think the Riot case was mainly about sexual discrimination and harassment. And then, yeah, I don't know if Noah has anything to add, but
Yeah, yeah, just a couple things quickly. One is, though the riot case was originally brought by private individuals, DFEH at this point is actively litigating it. So they joined the case after the fact. So I think that that's an indication that, um, again, that there are both serious cases. But I would agree with a lot of the analysis that you both shared. Obviously, the suicide brings a different element into this. That's something that Activision Blizzard definitely pushed back against strongly.
Mm.
That was somehow relevant, and they really used strong language to push back against the FEH for including that. But there was a second part to that question, right, about the video game industry, or did I imagine?
right. The second part of the question is, is this case anything specific to video game studios, or is it being treated fully as a workplace case?
Yeah, it's a workplace case. It's I want to say coincidence because I don't believe in them either. But it certainly is a pervasive issue. Clearly, if it's two, I mean, actually, I'll take it back. I can't say clearly it's a pervasive issue. It is an issue at these two publishers, at these two companies that are in the video game industry, that are more weighted, that have an imbalance of male and female employees. I think in the Activision at Activision, was it 80-20? Does that sound right? About 80-20. I mean, that's a huge imbalance. I think that's atypical of most major American corporations. So that's something that but again, no, from a legal standpoint and from a labor law standpoint and from everything else, there's nothing that I'm familiar with, nor that anybody said, that would somehow focus this on the video game industry.
Right. I would say that there's a lot of background information in the lawsuit mentioning the games industry, but other than that, it's really a workplace case. And when you mentioned 80-20, one thing I've been clarifying to some radio stations is I've been talking to them over the past few days. It's some teams might not even have any women, right? Because it's 80-20, but not evenly spread across the company. So there'll be more women on some teams and no women on other teams, and that would be even more of an imbalance. And maybe there's some teams with like one woman, and maybe those are the cases that are mentioned in the suit. But one other question. Oh, thank you. One other question from chat. Do you believe this issue and similar ones in the industry could bring about any kind of unionization effort at Blizzard or in the industry? Could the threat of that potential be enough for any change? And I think I will just quickly add, and maybe other people can hop in as well. But this is a question I got pretty often as I was on the radio, and it's a question I posed to the people at the walkout too, because as soon as I heard walkout, I was like, is this a strike? Is this what does it mean? Are you unionizing? Are you organizing? And the answer was not yet, and they are not there yet. They're just a group of employees focusing on the lawsuit for now. And it does seem like the video games industry is very slow to unionize, and it's been a issue brought up in like Jason Schreier's book, or in other articles that we've done in the past. And I don't know if either Mike or Noah has thoughts about video game unionization.
I mean, based on what we've seen from past GDC surveys, let me just rephrase and start again here. This lawsuit, for as seismic and potentially explosive as it is not new to the video game industry. We've seen this before. We've seen it with Riot. We saw the allegations with Ubisoft, although it was not in this form. So that in and of itself, to me, doesn't say, oh, unionization is imminent, because we've been here before and we still don't have any sort of games union to speak of. Does it push it a little bit closer? Probably. I think it should bear more discussion at this point. And I think we also need to keep in mind when we're talking about potential unionization, it's not just the issues brought in this lawsuit and cited in this lawsuit as allegations, but also just overwork, mandatory crunch, unfair salary practices. There are a whole bunch of industry issues that we've written about in the past and other outlets have written about in the past that could be addressed by unionization. Does that scare publishers into self-regulating a little bit more? Maybe, but we also haven't seen a really strong push to unionize, at least since I've been covering this with Launcher over the past several years. So does it change now? I'm interested to see it. Like I said, I think the big takeaway for me from yesterday was the Ubisoft letter and the suggestion that there should be a multi-studio, multi-developer, employee-driven panel or committee or board or some sort of body to help regulate some of these issues and complaints that are slipping through the cracks or not being acted on by publishers and employers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, right now we have the ESA, that organizes E3 every year, the annual video game conference, and were started in the 90s in response to like Congress investigating video games for their connection to violence. So it could be curious to see if any groups arise from this kind of moment that we're in now. So.
Yeah, for sure. I'm very interested in that.
Cool.
There's one point I had that we were talking about yesterday, Shannon, with our colleague Mikhail, which is this notion that seems to be circulating on social media in response to the Activision Blizzard offer to extend paid time off to any employees that went to the walkout yesterday. And the prevailing sentiment was that it's a trap, that it was a honeypot, that they were going to take down all the names of the people that went and then somehow either fire them or retaliate against them or blacklist them at a later point. I would like to take a quick second and ask, I think Noah might know more about this, but as far as I understand it, that would be highly illegal. And that they would effectively be doubling down on any sort of, like, they'd be basically taunting the government to come after them at that point, even more than they already are engaged with them. Noah, do I have that correct? Like that would be completely illegal, right?
I'm debating whether or not to say what I'm going to say, but I'm going to say it because why not? I think it's what the federal government in the United States did in California with driver's licenses, if I'm not mistaken. I think, and this was during the last administration, where during the Obama years, folks were told to sign up for driver's licenses if they were not citizens, if they did or did not have papers, and then Trump administration tried to subpoena those records from the state of California for that reason. I'm pretty sure that's the way that story went. So is that illegal? Certainly retaliation is illegal.
Yeah.
Certainly that's something that employees could bring action against if they were fired for it. But unfortunately, when it comes to employment law, specifically, it's difficult to prove that. So somebody gets fired from a company. Obviously the company's gonna say, well, it's because they weren't carrying their weight, and then the employee's gonna say, well, no, it's because I attended this walkout and this that, and then that's when you get into litigation. And again, a facet of our system is that it's for better and worse. The person who's bringing the case would have to finance it. They'd have to have the money for it, and then there's a big mental thing, if nothing else, if not financial. It's one person against a multi-billion-dollar market cap corporation. And if it was Activision, it could be anybody, right? It could be any company. And so, so retaliation certainly is illegal, but to prove that, much harder. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is about proving it ultimately.
Yeah. Well, I think we've talked about, almost every issue about Activision Blizzard. Maybe we can, just wrap it up with any final thoughts about this case. Where do you think it will go from here? Any next steps that you could see? I mean, for me, I think that Activision Blizzard lawsuit is a huge deal, and it will, we will continue to cover this over the next weeks, months to come, and obviously from the Ubisoft letter, as you mentioned, like there's more, it's not just one company, it's many to be looking at.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point, Shannon, that it doesn't stop with one lawsuit or one company. That there's going to be more issues of this nature to explore in the weeks and months ahead. One other fascinating thing to me is Activision Blizzard's ongoing relationship with its employees, which right now seems to be completely sour, and I think that's putting it mildly at best. But at one hand, they're going to have to fight this lawsuit, and to do so, they're going to have to issue statements of the nature they did right when the lawsuit came out, which are fiery and verbose and basically threatening that everything in this is lies, 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 lies. And every time they do that, they're going to anger their employees that know or feel otherwise about the charges leveled in this lawsuit. So you have two very, very fractured factions right now on both sides of this suit. And it's going to be a really, really tough job to walk that line internally in terms of inside that company when you have management and leadership, and then the lawyers wanting you to do one thing, and HR or just advocates for employees telling you or asking you to do others. It's going to be a really tough road ahead, and I'm curious to see if we continue to see the fire that we've seen from Activision Blizzard employees over the past several days, and how far they're willing to go to push for some of the changes that they're demanding. I think this is going to be a really interesting next couple months in terms of this case, and I just hope everyone lands on their feet as best they can, because I think this is going to be a really tough time mentally for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just end with a couple of thoughts. So one is with that, when it comes to Activision, for folks who are watching or listening, I think it's important also to remember that this isn't the first controversy that they faced in ever, but we're talking about the thing that happened where they tried to take winnings from a competitor in a tournament because he criticized China, which didn't go over well. That was right before BlizzCon. There were protests for that. Certainly the games themselves, there's been a lot of controversy. Even the focus at that point was a lot of times like on the fans, on the people who actually bought the games, and so now that sort of all of that has come inside for them, and so it will be fascinating to see what happens, because I'm not sure even now if they were to change course and say, you know what, we'll pay 100 million, we'll pay 200 million, we'll pay whatever it is. I don't know that would make this go away, and it might even incentivize everyone to push for more and to go farther. And what I'll end on is that what strikes me also about this case, and just a lot of the things that we're hearing from developers and people inside these companies, it seems to reflect a lot of what went on in Hollywood, in the early years of Hollywood, the early decades of Hollywood, where actors, producers, or not producers, actors, directors, just crew members were treated very poorly. They're expected to work all hours of the day and night, and in conditions that are difficult. And this, I mean, they still are, but now they're are well compensated for it in many cases. And so, one of the ways that it happened, United Artists is one of the early examples of the way that talent tried and crew, that was talent, tried to sort of bring things that they had leverage and they could push back a little bit and they could secure rights for themselves. And so, I think what I'm looking at and what I think is interesting is whether this industry will follow a similar path, and whether or not this could be a catalyst. I don't know that it would be the catalyst, but that it could be a catalyst for trying to create those kinds of unions like SAG-AFTRA or DGA or WGA, the ones that exist in Hollywood. So we'll be following it.
Yeah, those are really excellent points. Even I think there's a lot of analogies to be drawn between Hollywood and the games industry, where it's a passion project, it's an art form, and people were expected to be to be willing to do the work for less money and for longer hours, just because it's art. And so it's still we can still wait and see. And the other thing I want to mention is the fact that some consumers are boycotting World of Warcraft, and some streamers are not streaming those games anymore, and some media outlets are not covering Activision Blizzard games. So those boycotts, we can also just try to see how long they go on for, if consumers will remember this in a few months, and if they will actually go back to World of Warcraft at some point, or just try some other games instead. So we'll be here to cover all of that, and that'll be really interesting to see. And I also want to give a shout out to tomorrow. We may be streaming some Pokemon Unite, and we'll try to get a streamer on here. We'll try to get our full squad of 5 people. It'll be a tonal shift, but we'll try
a little lighter.
Cover that game for everyone here, and we'll be back next week again with more live streams. So I just want to give a thank you to both Mike and Noah for joining me to talk about this very hard topic. And
thank you, Shannon. I also like to thank John Elker behind the scenes for producing this and editing all of our great videos too. So
shout out to
John and Mike as well.
Yeah, shout out to our video producers. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. I hope you have a safe launch and have a great weekend.
Peace out.